Howdy, folks. Today is all about bugs. No, literally bugs. We're talking photographing critters of the macro world with the man, the legend that is, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners in audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. I mean, come on, people. You can really help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help me get even more amazing guests on the show. Just one click. That is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the macro photographer, educator, the YouTube legend. Give it up for the Spider-Man himself, Stewart Wood. Stewart, how's things, man?
Hello, Kirsten. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've been watching your videos for absolutely ever. And a lot of the things that I've learned about macro photography, I've actually learned by watching your videos. And one of the things I've sort of noticed about the stuff that you do is it involves a lot of bugs and spiders. Why bugs?
Yeah. They creep me out, so I don't know. I like photographing them. You know, I mean, I get asked quite a few times. I was on a workshop a few weeks ago and there's people asking me, do I photograph butterflies? And I'm like, I find them boring. I like the creepy spiders. I like my jumpy spiders. Everyone knows that. But I don't know. It's just something about the creepier the spider, the better. You know, it's like when you see a spider up close like that and everyone's like, wow. Because everyone's seen butterflies. They've all seen butterflies up close and stuff like that. But bugs and spiders, the weirder, the better. I just love it.
Have you ever had or have you always had a fascination with spiders ever since you were little, or what is it?
No, I actually suffer from arachnophobia. Yeah. So I started photographing, trying to get over my fear of spiders. But even to that, I mean, I like my jumpy spiders, but sometimes there's stuff I won't even touch. And I just feel like if it creeps me out while I'm photographing it, it's going to creep out the viewer. And I think that's pretty good, you know. When you're doing photography, it doesn't matter what genre you're doing, you want to evoke an emotion from the viewer, you know. So I go for the creepy side, you know.
I mean, spiders are interesting, and your bugs are generally interesting because, especially in macro photography, it's almost like a window to a hidden world. You know, I mean, everybody's seen a spider before, especially like a house spider or something, but you never really see them in the way that you see them in your photographs, like the detail, and we'll talk about the techniques involved in that. But it's just it's a beautiful window into a world that's on one hand hidden, but on the other hand, it's all around us all the time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about macro is you can do it in your garden. So you don't have to go very far at all to find something interesting to photograph, which is one of the reasons I chose macro, because I have suffered from depression in the past. So not having to leave the house to do photography was a real big benefit of macro, you know. And and it's like when it comes to the angles, you know, when you look at a spider normally, you're looking top down at it, so you know what it looks like, you've seen it. But then when you get the camera and put it in its face and do what I like to call an inset portrait, it gives it a whole of another character to the subject. And yeah, I love it, you know.
So do you literally just go around the house finding just regular spiders, or do you have like specific particular spiders that you prefer?
I used to, because obviously when you start in photography, you want an easy subject to photograph. So you just grab something from around the house. Now I tend to go out. Jumpy spiders, I love jumpy spiders, as you know. I keep them as pets. And one spider I'm after at the moment is a crab spider, but I can't get a picture of them. They keep eluding me. Everybody I follow on Instagram is posting crab spider images, and I'm like, I can't get it. So yeah, I'm always out in the wild looking for images that I haven't taken. I don't like taking the same image over and over again. I find it gets a little bit boring. You know, I've been there and done that. So I'm constantly looking for new subjects, new angles, new ways of doing things. So yeah, It's interesting. It's one of the hardest things, actually finding the subject.
Where do you normally find? You mentioned jumping spiders. Where do you find those?
Jumping spiders, typically you'll find those on man-made structures mostly. So your house wall, you'll find them on there, or on the fence that going down your garden. You'll see a little spider running around. It's got little zebra stripes on it, so it's like black and white. That's a jumping spider. So they're particularly good subjects because even people that suffer from arachnophobia like the jumping spider because they're not your typical spider that makes webs and cobwebs all over your house. And they've got two massive big eyes. That is the vision on them is just as good as what your vision is, and it gives them a kind of a nicer character than your general spider. So yeah, jump spiders anywhere hot. So if you've got a surface in your garden where the sun is shining on it and you get flies landing on it, you'll typically find a jumping spider on there somewhere.
Why are they called jumping spiders? Are they literally jumping? Or what's the thing with those?
Yeah. So your typical spider that everybody knows, it goes out, it makes a web, and your fly goes into the web. The spider runs out, grabs the prey. Whereas a jumping spider doesn't actually make a web; it actually hunts around for its prey. And when it spots its prey, which is typically, let's say, a fly, it will actually jump onto the prey to take it down like a lion would. It's quite fascinating to watch. It really is.
But then how do you photograph them? Is there literally
with difficulty? Have you ever photographed children?
Yes.
It's basically the same thing. You got to.
I see where you're coming from.
Either they run around and get tired and then just stop for a moment to take a breathe, which is when you get the shot, or you give them something to do. So typically, if I've got a jumping spider that won't cooperate, I'll give it a fly to feed it, and then it's like giving a child an ice cream when you want to take a picture of a child. They stop running around and they're eating the ice cream. It's basically the same thing. So you feed it, give it something to do. That they like to explore, jumping spiders do. So if you move it onto a different environment, it might start exploring the environment, and you can kind of predict where it's going to go. So if it's coming up the back of a flower, you can predict it's going to come up the top of the flower, and you can get into place quickly and get the shot as it comes over.
So do you catch them and then take them inside and photograph them, or do you literally photograph them in situ?
There's different levels. I mean, my pet jumping spiders, which I have on my shelf behind me, they are literally there for testing equipment because obviously I do reviews on YouTube. I teach macro, so they're very useful for teaching macro. Wild jumping spiders, I try to capture them in their environment if I'm able to, but sometimes you can't do that. So I might move it if it's a species I haven't photographed before. I might move it onto one of my platypod setups, so that I can get a decent picture of it. But most of the time I'm trying to get them in situ, unless it's my pet one, of course. And again, if I wasn't teaching macro or doing YouTube, I probably wouldn't have pet jumping spiders, but they're just great for teaching macro photography.
So it's literally a test spider.
It is like having a test spider, yeah. So if someone sends me a lens for review, the first thing I photograph is my spider because I'm very familiar with them. And if there's an issue with one of the lenses or a camera setup, I'll immediately spot it by photographing my pet jumping spiders.
And I noticed you just mentioned platypod, of course.
Yeah.
I know you're a platypod pro.
Yes.
Just like myself. So welcome to the world of platypods. There you
welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. Exactly. Incredible tools. I mean, how we'll get into how you photograph these spiders. But what is the sort of the toolkit in order to photograph, bugs and spiders? Outdoors or in the studio? How do you?
Like I said before, I mean, I said it on one of my last videos I uploaded. If I wasn't doing YouTube, I probably wouldn't do studio macro. I'd be completely outdoor macro. But from a teaching point of view, the studio it's a great tool for teaching. Okay, so if we stick to my personal work, that is outdoor work. Okay, and to photograph the bugs outdoors, you really need a setup that is geared towards macro photography. Now, you can do it on any camera. You can use extension tubes to convert your normal lenses into a macro lens. But if you want to get the results like I do, you really got to start gearing towards actual macro gear. And one of the key things is your camera needs to be fast, because these things are moving around. You need to get the shot very, very quickly. So knowing your gear, knowing how to quickly alter your settings, and above all, knowing the species you're photographing as well. Like if we take, for instance, a jumper spider, I know roughly what it's going to do. I know it's going to have a look around on the plant and all that. If we take the crab spider, I'm not familiar with the crab spider, so I keep missing shots because they're very skittish. So each species, you've got to approach them from a different perspective. So you've got your one that's scared, you've got the other one that's adventurous. The jumper spiders will quite often jump onto your camera, which can be a bit daunting because there's so many little nooks and crannies that they can get into that, you might have a spider inside your diffuser, but then when you're photographing other spiders, they're completely different. So, yeah, the number one thing you really need to do is know your subject that you're photographing. That way you can predict what they are going to do when you start photographing them.
And I guess that's exactly where the crossover to wildlife photography is,
yes.
Where you just need to know the animal that you photograph. I mean, regardless as to whether it's a lion, for example, or a dog, or a spider.
It's basically the same for most genres. You need to know the subject that you're photographing to give you, I'd say, better odds of getting a shot is probably the best way to put it. If you don't know a species, you might get the odd shot that works, but with macro, you're talking 1 out of 100 shots will be okay. I won't say they're the best shot. It'll be okay or satisfactory. So anything you can do to increase the odds is in your favour, basically. So you want a fast camera. When I say fast camera, I'm on about the frames per second. You want a flash. If you're using flash, that is, you want a flash that can recycle quickly. If you're using natural light, then obviously it's frame rate of the camera. The more frames you can bang out, the more chance you've got one that's in focus. Because typically with macro photography, we're not using autofocus, we're using manual focus. And when it comes to a macro lens, we typically set the magnification that we want off that setup. So if you imagine if you're handheld at 1 times magnification, you're moving backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. The spider's moving around. It's a very split-second chance that your focus is bang on where you want it. So the more shots you can bang out, the better. It's a nightmare in editing, but at least you get that one shot that's in focus.
I mean, in the macro world, I find focus is difficult at the best of times. I mean, I shoot toys once in a while, and it's difficult to actually just get a Lego figure into focus. There are techniques like focus stacking, for example, but I'm guessing that when you're hand holding, focus stacking is not really an option.
To be honest with you, half of my stuff is handheld focus stack.
How do you do that?
I'll be honest with you, it's the camera.
Right.
I use the Olympus system, and its stabilization is absolutely phenomenal. If I was to get my Canon setup out, I have done handheld, but again, your hit rate is a lot lower. So you might take 500 to 1,000 shots to get one stack that works. With the Olympus, I'm constantly banging out shots because, again, the speed of the camera is fast and the stabilization is very good in that camera. So there's that. And then there's also the other technique, which is going out in the middle of the night, because in the middle of the night, the insects are too cold to move about, so they literally just sit still for you. Hard to spot them sometimes because they're not moving, but when you find one and it's just sitting there, you can literally spend half an hour setting up a scene if you wanted to. They're not going anywhere. They're too cold.
That's actually a great tip. I didn't know that. I mean, that's a great idea.
So insects are exothermic, so they don't produce their own body warmth. So in the morning, when the sun comes up, you'll find the insects, they'll be sunbathing, essentially. And what they're doing is they're warming up, ready to move about in the day. So if you can catch them before they're warmed up, they're not going anywhere. Dragonflies won't fly about. Damselflies won't fly about. You got time to set up, and some of my best shots I've got in my portfolio have been taken at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, plenty of time to get set up and get everything done, and they still move about. I'll be honest with you, they do still move about, but it's very, very subtle. Like they might move a leg or something like that, but you've got time to retake the shot again. Unlike in the middle of the day, very good chance you get one shot, a single shot, and it'll fly away. So, yeah, it all comes down to your personal choice as to whether you want to go out in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's personal choice, you know. I love it. I really do.
I mean, I'm thinking, if you're, for instance, if you're focus tagging, especially with flash, even given the recycle rate of, even if you have a fast speed light, for example, the recycle rate is still going to be like, I don't know, half a second or something like that. How do you?
Not with the Olympus system. Not with the Olympus. I can get up to 10 frames a second with my flash with the Olympus system.
Really?
Yeah, it's really, really fast. And Olympus has geared their stuff. I mean, I don't know if it is. I'm not an insider. I'm not an Olympus ambassador or anything, But what they do is geared towards wildlife and macro. So it's a micro four thirds system. So you got the advantage of that particular sensor, and the refresh time on the Godox flash I use is very fast. So by powering down the flash, I'll explain this in case someone doesn't know. When it comes to a flash, the less power you have on the flash, the quicker the recycle time is. So what you can do is you can turn down your flash power and bump up your ISO to compensate for the exposure, and then you get a really fast recycle time. And with my particular system, I can get anywhere from, let's say, 8 to 10 frames a second from that system. On my Canon system, it's an old Canon EOS R, I only get 3 seconds. So if you imagine you've got a bug, it's going to keep still for, say, 5 seconds. I can get, say, 50 images done with my Olympus, whereas I can only get 15, is it, with the EOS R. So the faster your recycle time, the faster your camera can take pictures, the more chance you've got of getting a successful shot in macro.
How do you light that inside? You mentioned Godox flash. Do you use a particular diffuser attachment, or how do you light it?
So this is my setup. Let me get into the middle here. This is my setup I use for my personal projects. So if you forget YouTube, forget reviews, this is my personal setup, and it's an Olympus, which is now rebranded as OM Systems. It's an EM1 Mark II. It's a 7-year-old camera. It's not the top of the range camera. It might surprise your viewers there. I don't need the top of the range camera. Attached to that, I have the 60mm macro, just there, very small. I mean, what's the size of my thumb? Okay. We have a Godox V350O flash, and then the magic key to the setup is this contraption here. This is the diffuser. So if anyone's doing portraiture, you'll know what a diffuser is. Your big, massive softbox you stick on your light. That's essentially what this is, but it's for insects, and this is the Cygnus Tech diffuser. It softens the light, it wraps the light around the insects, gives a nice, great light for your insects. And I'm always coming back to talking about portraits because it's basically the same thing. If you don't put a diffuser on your portrait flash, it's going to look awful. It doesn't matter how beautiful your model looks, it's going to look awful. So you have to have a good diffuser. And by good, I don't mean expensive. You can get budget-friendly ones, but get a good diffuser on your setup, and you won't look back, And again, you don't have to have the top-end camera. This entire setup, I'm going to tell you how much this setup costs. It might actually surprise you. Actually, have a guess how much this entire setup costs. But you've probably watched my videos, haven't you?
Yes. I didn't watch the Olympus ones or the OM.
Yeah. This entire setup costs around £1,000. That's it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of people think macro is expensive to get into. It's really not expensive to get into. If you've got, let me see. So here we have Sony A1. So if you've got Sony A1, you've got, let's say, I'm just going to pluck stuff out of my head, it's like a 70-200mm lens. Then if you want to try macro, all you got to do is get a clip-on lens, which I have somewhere here. Let's put that out of the way. You can just buy clip-on lenses like this. It's basically essentially a magnifying glass for your camera setup. You can clip that onto your lens to get more magnification, or you can buy extension tubes as well, which will extend your lens away from the camera body, increasing the magnification. So it's not expensive to get into, but again, if you want to get images like what I'm getting, you've really got to start gearing towards gear that is made specifically for macro photography.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new Handheld, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. I mean, one of the first things I think people think about is macro lenses. And of course, macro lenses can be, but it's two things about it. Macro lenses can be quite pricey. And at the same time, there are also lots of different ones. And I remember when I got into shooting some toy photography, just, for fun, a while ago, I got hold of a 105 macro, a Sigma 105 macro. I like it.
Sigma 105.
It's a really great lens. It works for that. What is the impact of different focal lengths when it comes to macro lenses?
Different focal lengths, basically, it's your depth of field and how close you get to your subject. So there's a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is different for every macro photographer, okay? It's like talking about Marmite. You either love it or you hate it, okay? My sweet spot is, if I can bring this in for you, my sweet spot's about that far away from the lens, because then I'm able to hold something in my hand, like a leaf that's got a ladybird on it, but I'm also able to brace my camera against it for handheld macro photography. So if I'm stacking, I don't want to use a tripod. It's too constrictive. But the longer the focal length, you'll increase your working distance. So the benefit of that is you're not spooking the insects as much. So you got more chance of getting the shot. So if you're photographing, say, in the middle of the daytime, and you want to photograph like damselflies and dragonflies, you want a longer focal length. So, you could typically use your 70 to 200, or 200 to 600 mil, and that's classed as close-up photography. There'll be someone out there who's cursing because it's not macro. We're talking insects, okay? And then as you decrease the focal length, you get into the more wide-angle macro lenses where you're getting more of the environment in shot, but you're also getting closer to your subject, and in return, the closer you get, the less depth of field you get as well. So it's all like a trade-off depending on the type of photographer you are. I like my around 100mm macro lenses. That's a 60mm, but on a Micro Four Thirds sensor, it's 120mm full frame equivalent. But I have used wide-angle lenses. They are very hard to use, but they do give a unique type of image to the macro photography. But it's like portraiture. People like their 35mm lenses, they like the 50s, they like their 85mm 1.8 lenses. It's the same with macro. Every macro photographer's got their own lens that they prefer, and again, it depends on the type of image I'm going for. If I'm going for a portrait, I'll use my 60. If I'm going for a dragonfly shot, I might use a longer focal length lens, because you can't get close to them sometimes because they're in the middle of a pool. These insects, they're like children. They never keep still for you to take a photo. So you've got to be there at the right time to get the opportunity to get the shot. So if you've got if you think ahead of what you're photographing and bring that equipment, it will again increase your odds of getting a shot.
What's a good focal length to get started with? Is somebody listening might be thinking, oh, actually macro is something I always wanted to get into, but I've never really known where to start. What's a good lens to get started with? I
think if we talk a broader wide of camera companies, I think most camera companies do around a 100mm, and that's a good focal length to get started with. It gives you good depth of field with an out of focus background with good working distance as well. So the Canon does one, Nikon does one, Sigma that does one. The Sigma is a very budget friendly lens as well if you want to get into it. Sony has the 90mm, which is this one just here. Okay, that's a fantastic lens for your Sony cameras if you want to have a go at Sony. But again, if you're wanting to have a go, I wouldn't buy a macro lens because they're expensive. And without the experience, you might get a bit frustrated with it. So again, it would come back to, again, we're talking if you just want to have a go at macro, I'd come back to just buying a clip-on lens. They're only like £50 to £100. So that's not going to break the bank for anybody. I don't know the price on the Sony. I think it's 900. I think the Sony is. But if you find yourself liking macro, I can guarantee you'll end up having an Olympus setup. Because that's the same price. And what made me buy that, because I was on Canon and I was looking at the Canon lens, and it's £1,400 for the Canon lens. And I had the old EF 100mm lens, fantastic lens. But I sold that along with the MPE 65mm lens and bought this entire setup, which, when it comes to full frame equivalency, is basically the same setup, but it costs a lot less. It's a lot smaller as well, and it's very light. So, yeah.
That's going to make a lot of my friends happy, because I have a lot of friends who shoot OM systems or Olympus.
There is a lot of people switching to it. There's a lot of people switching to OM systems. I mean, yeah, when you pick up a camera, you're always told full frame is best. You are, aren't you? I mean, let's be honest with you. We are told full frame is best. I fell for that, so I bought a full frame camera. Now, when you get a shot on that full frame camera, the images look sweet. They're dreamy. They really are nice. But when you want to get portraits of insects like I want, you want the Olympus, because it's a micro four thirds sensor, which means you're getting a 2x crop factor. Now, it's not magnification, so you'll get someone in technical might point this out. It's not optical magnification, it's a crop. But to get the same density of pixels on a full frame camera that camera does, you need an 80 megapixel full frame camera. So to get the same crop, basically, yeah. But inherently with that, because you've got a 2x crop, to get the same field of view that you would do with a full frame camera, you've got to take a step back, okay, because of the crop factor increases your focal length. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, so my 60mm turns into 120mm. So to get the same field of view that this 60mm would do on the Sony, I have to take a step back. And again, distance affects your depth of field. So by stepping back, you're increasing the depth of field. So with a micro four thirds camera, you're inherently getting better depth of field at a fixed f-stop number. So if you're using f8, you got a bigger depth of field than you would have on a full frame camera. It's very slight, but every little helps. Every little helps when it comes to doing macro.
But that's always the thing about sensor sizes. So I feel, for instance, I'm a big proponent of using APS-C sensors, for instance, for telephoto. If you're shooting sports or something, because all of a sudden your 70-200 all of a sudden turns into a 300, and and you're actually, because you're not cropping in per se, even if you're shooting on a 24 megapixel sensor, you're still having a 300 image.
Yeah, it's still a 20 megapixel image coming out of that. So my full frame is 30 megapixels. So I'm still getting better with the little Olympus, because again, the crop factor, the greater depth of field. So if I put f14 on my lens on my Olympus one, I'm going to get a bigger depth of field, which means more is in focus, which means there's less need to focus stack if I can't. So if you photograph ants, for instance, you're not focus stacking ants because they never stop, even at night. They just don't stop. So the more depth of field you can get, the better, because depth of field is a bane of macro photographers as well as light as well. So gear does matter when it comes to macro photography if you're going to pursue it as something for your portfolio. If you're just tinkering around, it really doesn't matter. Slap a It's like a macro lens on your full frame camera, or buy a clip-on lens, and you'll get some macro shots that you're quite happy with. But again, if you want to go, I don't want to use the word professional, but if you want to get like the stuff I'm getting, the gear really does matter. It's a bit the same with wildlife. You're not going to go and do wildlife photography with the 70-300 Tamron lens that comes with your kit lenses and with your Canon. You're going to go and buy yourself a decent lens for wildlife.
Yeah,
it's the same as macro.
Exactly.
You do need the gear. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I not too long ago, I found myself on a speedboat in a fjord in northern Arctic Norway shooting sea eagles. Mm-hmm. And I very quickly realized that the 70-200 wasn't really doing very much, and so I spent most of the time shooting with a 400, which was perfect for the job. But also, I realized that I should have gone to the gym, I think, before that, because it was impossible to hold up. It's just not happening.
I mean, I've got the Sony A1. A good friend of mine has loaned me this. He said, give it. He's actually switched to OM Systems, so he's selling the Sony. So if anyone wants a Sony, let me know. But he said, give the Sony a go for some macro, okay? And then he goes and, he goes and gives me this thing, okay? Go and photograph some dragonflies with it, which I'm going to do. God, it's heavy. I mean, that's the 200 to 600 Sony lens. God, you need to go to the gym to use that gear. I mean, all respect for wildlife photographers out there. This gear is heavy, But
it's heavy.
Again, you buy the gear that you need to get the shots that you have, I mean, I like my little setup. That's all I need, okay? I mean, it's... You buy the gear you need to get the shot. It's as simple as that. And I'm an advocate for only upgrading when you absolutely need to. So you won't find me buying the latest gear when it comes out, because I've got no need for it. Now, if something comes out that fixes an issue I have, then I'll buy it then, But yeah, keep it budget friendly as much as possible.
Yeah, and keep it simple. That's the thing. It's the same in portrait photography. There's many things that I could buy and I don't, because I actually don't need them. It's
exactly.
If there ever is a need for it, then if there's a need to upgrade for whatever reason, then potentially make a buying decision. Although more often than not, I just hire things. If I have a job where I know that image is going to be put on the side of a bus, that's reason enough for me to go and hire a higher resolution camera for that particular job.
Sounds like we've got the same mentality when it comes to gear. You only upgrade if there's a need for it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and also, there are lots of tools. We mentioned Platypod earlier. Platypod tools. I love those tools because they're so versatile. Everything around me is basically held up in some way, shape, or form by some tool that's made by Platypod.
Yeah, I've got Platypod gear all on here. And what can I say about sounding like a fanboy when it comes to Platypod? Platypod are great to work with, because I told them straight that if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you. I tell the truth. And so far, I like the Platypod stuff, but I haven't broken any of it. Which is a big, massive difference, because obviously I come from the budget world. I shop on Amazon, certain company that will remain nameless because we don't get sued, but they produce budget gear, and I'm always breaking it, But the Platypod stuff, I actually gave away a Platypod to a friend of mine, because it was the very first gen Platypod, the big thick metal plate one.
Yeah.
Because it was still working. I hadn't broken it, and Platypod had sent me their new stuff. Because obviously being a pro, they want me to use their newer stuff. So I gave my old stuff away to a friend of mine because he had need for it. I haven't used my old stuff, man. It's not going to get used. And it hasn't worn out, It's great.
Yeah. What I like about Platypod is they're very innovative. There's always new things that they're either working on or that are coming out. Now, sometimes I think, I'm not too sure what I'm going to use that for. Let's say the Handheld was a really good example. When the Handheld first came out, I thought oh, okay, well, it's a neat idea. I'm not very sure what use I'm going to have for it, other than the fact that it looks like a lightsaber handle. So, I'm on board with that. But, there you go. But that being said,
lightsaber.
Yes.
This thing, I mean, I absolutely love this thing. I'll be honest with you, I really do like it. If you want a simple setup for macro, okay, you take your head off the tripod, you pop this on there, okay, so you got that there. You put your ball head or whatever head you got on the tripod onto there, okay. You then get one of these, which is an elbow, okay, and we can screw that directly into the handle, which is it's great. It's got 8 of these. So I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. You got 8 of these accessory holes. So now that's on my tripod. I have my ball head on there. So now I have somewhere to put my subject, which is just here on a leaf, and I can have a background with just this setup, you know?
Yeah.
And I've always got 2 of these in my bag. I've got 4 elbows, I've got 4 super clamps, because you never know what situation you might run across when you're out in the wild. You go out, I might go out and go, I'm going to go photograph a damselfly or something like that, and you might run across something else that you've never photographed before. And I have had it where I'm like, I've left the platypod gear at house, I didn't think I'd need it, you know, and I'm like, damn, because by the time you go home and come back, that subject's gone, you know, it's gone.
Yeah. It's also, it weighs nothing. You can, it's so easy to take around with you. Like I said, I mean, just like I use clams and elbows for all sorts of different stuff, and to hold up backgrounds in toy photography. I've just done a little series on toy photography for the Platypod YouTube channel. And it's so useful, just to hold up.
It is.
Anything.
It is. It's a bit expensive. I do get people commenting that it's a bit expensive, but look, you buy that, you're buying it once. Okay. Yeah. I mean, if I haven't managed to break it, then you're not going to break it. So it's like a one-time purchase. So I've now, I should say, Platypod have now kitted me out with everything I need to do my macro photography. So yeah, I just take it everywhere with me, no matter what situation I'm in. The gear's there that I need. If I can photograph, let's say, a damselfly where it is, I can do that. If I can't, I've got the gear to move it over to my what I call the macro studio. It's a mobile macro studio, and photograph it on there. So yeah, it's great stuff. It really is.
I remember you mentioned something about backgrounds, and I saw some of your videos where you talk about and you demonstrate how you use background cards, even out in the field. And I thought that was immediately super interesting for me, because for some reason, I've seen macro shots in photo competitions, for example, and I've always sort of assumed that the backgrounds are, well, they're just what they are. Not so, as I've learned by watching your videos.
Yeah, it depends on the photographer. I'm more of an artist than a photographer. Whereas if you get a purist, he'll have the natural background. But even then, they'll try and find the natural material that's there in the environment to get into the background. What I don't like, which you typically see in macro photography, is a black background. And that's caused because the light from your flash isn't reaching the background. So it's called the inverse square law of light. It fades off and it's not powerful enough to light up the background. So that's where we would either put in a background card, so it's just like a textured card, it just gives a nice bright background, or it can bring in some foliage that is in the area and put it into the background. The problem with that is a lot of the times it's going to be green or brown, and I like to use super saturated colours in my images. I like to have different backgrounds. I like to put flowers in the background and stuff like that. So the Platypod gear is great for doing that because it all holds it in place. And if you have a tripod head that has the horizontal panning, then you can put your subject on it and you can just turn it around on your tripod head and your background stays in place. It's brilliant, it really is. And I've got loads of videos on my channel about how to use that setup, so if anyone's interested, go and check that out.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that that really fascinated me. And I know you create these background cards yourself.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I love going out and shooting textures in particular, which I use a lot of the time for portrait photography. Actually, if I just want to overlay a texture and create a slightly more textured background, for example, And
that's where I learned to do it.
yeah,
Yeah, because I started off as a portrait photographer. I just found it boring.
right.
So, each to their own. But yeah, I watched Glyn Dewis. He used to do grey backgrounds and then putting textures onto the backgrounds and all that. And I thought to myself, why can't we have the texture already in the background when you take the photo? And that's where it started off with, we can do this for macro, because in portraiture, you've got a massive sheet or paper background. In macro, it's about that big. It's just a little card, Just put it in the background. You can create super bright, colourful backgrounds, or you can use them to create different effects. So, for instance, if you've got a glass surface, you can put the card in the background. It'll colour the glass. Yeah, so if you wanted a green glass, you put a green card in the background. Yeah, or you can create contrast. So if I've got, say, a dark spider, I'll put a lighter background in the background. So it'd be a flower or a card, and that gives contrast, making the subject pop out from the frame.
That's one of the things I really love about your photography, especially, like I said, the bugs and the spiders, is that, there's so much color in there. Like, there's so much detail and so much color in there. It really makes them stand out from a lot of other macro images that I've seen. How do you achieve that? Well, first of all, how do you achieve the color in there? Do you gel the speed light, or how do you do that?
No, I mean, a lot of the instances, the color that's on the actual insect is the color of the insect. And because insects, I think it's mostly the males, they have colourful because they're trying to attract a female. So you've got the colourful there, but also if you place the background close enough to the subject, you'll get bounce light from it as well. So if you've got a flower in the background, the light will bounce off the flower and create a rim light around the subject, so particularly around damselfly eyes. If you look at some of my damselfly shots, you'll see the colour of the background going around the lights, like a rim light. So it's all technique with the background, the flash. The flash is basically the same colour every single time, and we just create it with either bouncing it from the background, or it's just the natural look of the insect, like the damselfly images that I have. They're all that's what they look like, which can be a nightmare sometimes because some of them are metallic. And I don't know if you've tried photographing metallic surfaces, but it can be a nightmare. Yeah. There's some beetles that are on my local nature reserves. They're like they're like a dark purpley blue. Cannot get a picture of them because they're constantly reflecting the flash. So sometimes it's a bane. Sometimes you get a really good image. It's to and fro when it comes to macro.
It's definitely, I mean, it's a super interesting subject matter. It's it's definitely something I'm going to try, just for fun, because as you said, it's a perfect thing to try at home or in your garden, or it's just something you can quite easily do, as a hobby, for example.
If you want to have a go at macro, then the first thing you need to do is get your set up for macro. So you're going to need to try and get at least a 1-to-1 magnification ratio, which means whatever is projected onto your sensor is that size. So if you was to place an ant onto the sensor at 1-to-1, that's the size that the picture would come out as. Okay, so you want to try and get a 1-to-1. You then got to deal with lighting. You can try natural light. It is very hard to do natural light macro. So respect to the natural light macro photographers out there. I go with flash because it's easier. And for subject, I'd go with ants. So if you go into your garden, you look on your plants, you'll probably find a load of aphids on the plants. Those are little bugs that basically suck the nutrients out of the plant. And typically, ants will farm aphids like we farm cows. Okay, it's like a symbiotic relationship. So the ants protect the aphids, and the aphids give them honeydew, which is secreted from their rear end, and the ants drink it. So if you find a nice group of aphids, there's going to be ants there, guaranteed. So you've got your camera set up, you've got a subject that you know is going to be there, and it's just a case of practice and wait for the right moment for the ant to come up and get the shot. and you focus directly on the eyes of the ant if you can, and just snap away. And I guarantee you now, anyone's trying this, you'll get hundreds of images that are just blurred, okay? It's normal. It's absolutely normal for macro, okay? You're talking maybe 1 out of 100 images that is okay. 1 out of 1,000 that is portfolio worthy. So if you go out there and you get a bunch of images that are just, just no good, it's normal, okay? It's absolutely normal.
Unfortunately, I've just literally killed a lot of ants. I said it. Well, I don't know if I've killed them. I've actually, I've motivated them to not go through my kitchen. Because,
Hey, I do the same thing. Listen, I love my ants, but if they come in the house, it's fair game. It really is.
Absolutely. But it's a great thing to get started with. If that's the kind of thing.
Macro is getting more and more popular as the years go on because people are starting to find it's not as difficult as they thought it was. It's not as expensive to get into because, again, you can just buy the clip-on lenses if you want to give it a go. Like I said before, if you want to give it a go, never buy a macro lens. You're just throwing money away if you're going to do that. And with modern technology as well, with high ISO and noise reduction, it's getting a lot easier to actually get the shot as well. So it is getting more popular.
And, of course, if, weather permitting, of course, over, spring, summer is a great time to go out and and find insects.
Unless you live in the UK.
Yeah, well, but even in the winter, it's so easy to shoot toys. There's an interesting thing. I was at a camera club meeting not too long ago, and we were talking about that different different kind of focus groups, and one of the focus groups was macro photography, and for some reason I found myself at. And one of the common aspects was that people were complaining that you could only do macro photography basically for a certain part of the year because, the weather you don't have any insects. And I went like, well, has anybody ever thought about shooting toys? And it was interesting because the reaction immediately was like, oh, yeah. Oh, toys. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Like, I mean, it's so difficult.
It can be difficult, but anyone who wants to give macro a really good go, okay, go out to a duck pond, find some feathers, okay, place them on a desk and simply place a water drop onto it, and that's it. Okay, you can light it with natural lights, you can have the light coming through the window, you can use LED lights, and you can create some really creative macro shots just with that very simple setup. Water drops on anything works brilliantly. It really does. So dandelion seeds, you put a water drop on there. Anything. I'm trying to think of something you can't put water drops on. Water drops work with everything. So if you really want to give a macro a go, water droplet is what I would suggest you start doing because it's not going anywhere. You can do it in your kitchen with natural light. You can just use a clip-on lens or extension tubes for your existing setup. So you don't need to buy a new lens. You don't need to buy a new camera. You haven't got a 4K for anything. All you're doing is just putting a water drop onto a subject. And yeah, but one of the early things I started was water drops, mostly with dandelion seeds, water dropping on top of a dandelion seed. You can get some really creative shots with that. And from that is where you start moving on to the insects, because obviously you're going from a still subject to a moving subject. And then from there, you can incorporate the whole lot. So you can have water droplet with fraction photography on an insect, like with my damselfly image that I produced, or the one with my jumping spider. So yeah, it's the possibilities are endless. They really are.
And that's really the beauty of it, because it is literally like, we mentioned at the very beginning, is that, you open up this window into a world that's usually hidden from plain sight.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah. Another good thing you can do once you've got the setup, you don't even need macro, you can have close-up setup, is go out after it's rained and you'll find flowers with water drops on them, and you can just take natural water drop flower photography. A lot of people like that type of dreamy look. And when it comes to that setup, set your lens down to the lowest aperture it can do, and you can get a really dreamy look, and you ain't got to worry about the whole image being in focus. You haven't got a focus stack. You're not worrying about something moving around. It's a great way to get into it. It really is.
And I think sometimes when you mention photo stacking, sometimes I think people tend to sort of shy away from things like macro and even toy photography because they think, okay, well, now I have to get into this whole other thing of like learning new techniques like photo stacking. What technique do you use when it comes to photo stacking, for example?
Well, I'll talk about two different techniques because we have full frame cameras and then we got the macro setup. So typically with older cameras, not necessarily newer ones, but particularly older cameras, you have to do your focus stacking manually. So you're going to take your camera, you're going to take a shot, move it forward slightly, take another shot, move it forward slightly, take another shot, move it forward slightly, take another shot. And you just get a series of images where the focus point is at different points throughout the scene. And then in software, we can combine those together and the software will choose just the sharp pixels and combine them all together to create a shot where your depth of field is higher than you physically can get with the actual equipment. Because depth of field is something that inherently comes with the optics from your camera and your lens. So by doing focus stacking, you get around that. Now, when we come on to the more recent cameras and the macro setup that I have, you've got in-camera focus stacking where you can set up the camera, you set where you want your focus point to be, you hit the shutter button and the camera will automatically adjust your focusing point and take another shot until you tell it to stop doing that. And that's where it comes down to where gear matters, because the Olympus gear at the moment is the best on the market for doing focus stacking. A lot of camera systems, I'm not going to name brands, but a lot of camera systems cannot trigger a flash while doing focus bracketing. So if you're a natural light photographer, you're perfectly okay. But if you're using flash, again, you're gonna end up on the OM system. You really are for focus bracketing, focus stacking, particularly if you're using a flash, because again, OM system, I try not to be a fanboy because I'm not a fanboy and I'm not an ambassador before anyone says, okay, I'm not an ambassador, but the OM system at the moment is the best at doing focus, stacking and bracketing in camera with a flash. So if you're using flash, you're going to end up on that system. You really are, unless the competition catches up.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I have used my Nikon gear to do focus stacking. I actually never used a flash with it, so that'd be worth trying out. No idea whether that's going to work or not.
I have a question for you, though, since you are a Nikon user. Can you focus bracket while looking through your EVF?
That's a very good question. I actually don't know. I don't know because...
Find out from because I don't know anyone who uses Nikon, and I know Nikon does focus bracketing. I know it can trigger the flash with the bracketing, but some users have reported to me saying that you can only do focus bracketing by actually accessing the menu on the back of the camera. You can't look through the viewfinder while doing it. So for handheld insect macro photography, it would pretty much be useless because you can't physically look through the viewfinder. But yeah, let me know. Or maybe you can put something on down the bottom of the screen when you edit it to say, yeah, it can do it.
Yeah, that is a very good... I mean, it's actually a very good point. I mean, yes, in order to access the focus stacking or focus bracketing menu, you need to go into the menu and there's a start button.
Yeah.
Or, it's a touchscreen thing.
You'd have to look into it. With the Olympus system, you can set it up so that when you press your shutter button, it starts to stack. You can look through the viewfinder, the EVF while you're stacking. And again, the image stabilization makes it very easy to get handheld stacks. If you're not doing handheld and you're doing tripod, then it frees you up to many more camera brands that you can do your work with. But at the moment, most people are leaning towards the OM system for insect macro photography with focus bracketing.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, obviously, you can set some of the buttons to, set to your whatever user preset it is. But I have to look into that. That's an interesting thing I haven't really thought about. Because in my case, I've used it on a tripod predominantly to focus bracket, mainly toys. So
Well, with toys, they're not going anywhere, so you're better off on tripod, you know. But when it comes to, if you've got a camera that doesn't do in-camera focus stacking, then the easiest way to do it would be, and I'll go through this, okay? You want to put a flash. If you use a flash, of course, if you're natural light, ignore the flash bulb. If you put a flash on it, set it to a minimum power, then set your camera to a continuous burst. And like with this Sony one, you've got continuous low, medium, high. So you test each setting to see which burst mode can keep up with the flash. And what you're aiming to do is to get the most frames per second where the flash fires on each shot. Okay, so whether that's 5 frames a second or 10 frames a second, let's say it's 10 frames a second for a modern camera that it can do that. Once you do that, then what you want to do is you start with your insect out of focus, you press your shutter and you hold it down for a continuous burst with the flash going off, and then you slowly move that camera through the focus plane of the insect's head. So you're getting all of the shots that you need for focus stacking, and then you just throw it into the software afterwards for the software to do its stacking. And the software does a fantastic job, and I'm particularly using Helicon Focus at the moment. It will automatically align your images, and it will also adjust the exposure of the images so they're all consistent. So, it's a no-brainer. You haven't really got to figure it out much. All you got to do is figure out the fastest method for your camera, and then just hold the button down and just spray and pray. Literally spray and pray.
How many frames do you normally shoot for, like a typical focus stack, let's say for,
if I'm doing one for my portfolio, like the ones that you've seen, you're talking 100 to 200 images per focus stack. Bear with me. Yes?
What if you're not planning to go out anywhere?
No, I'm doing an interview. Okay. Come here, right. No, you've come in there, you're going to be on YouTube. Okay. Then my son just come in to ask, is typical British summer weather, it started raining again, so...
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah,
no.
What is it?
There's a truck outside.
A truck outside, doing what? No, right, no. Right, go on then. See, you interrupting into interview, you on camera. Okay, thank you for letting me know anyway. Yeah, we've got thunderstorms coming in though. I can feel it in my head. Where was I? Yeah, so you're spraying and praying, basically, like you would do with sports, you're taking as many shots as possible. And if your stack doesn't work because the insect's moved or something, then you're guaranteed to have that one shot where the eye of the insect is actually in focus. Because you've taken that many images, you're going to get that one shot as well. So it is a useful method for doing it. It's not friendly on your hard drive. It's not friendly on your computer when you edit it afterwards. But my advice would be, if your stack doesn't work and you fall back to the single image that you're going to edit, then throw away all the others, just delete them. That doesn't have need keeping them, That'll fill up your hard drive space. But typically, in say a nighttime situation where I go at nighttime, I'm particularly out till about 5 o'clock in the morning, I could have upwards of 5,000 images that I bring home, which is a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned Helicon Focus. I mean, I know you can do focus stacking in Photoshop. What are the advantages of using Helicon Focus? Let's say
Helicon Focus is a dedicated focus stacking software. So I found typically with Photoshop, if you're doing 15 images or less, you're okay with Photoshop. But if you start doing 50, 100, 200 image focus stacks, you're better off buying dedicated software that does it for you. It also has a very nice raw workflow, so you can actually edit in the digital negative format and output it as a digital negative back into Lightroom for editing your colours, and then take it into Photoshop afterwards for any type of cleanup. Because when it comes to macro, a little piece of grain of dust is like having a plank of wood in front of a model, And if you're taking photos of these beautiful subjects, you want to present them in the best possible way. So you will be doing a lot of cleanup on these images, particularly if you get a stack that really works well. There's a lot of haloing where the software didn't stack it properly. You get halos around certain subjects. And I'll throw you over some example images so you can show the audience the halos. And you have to go in there. You've got to clean them all up. So it's like portrait photography. You're not going to do a high-end portrait photography and not retouch the image. You know, you're going to present that model in the best possible way. And it's the same with the insects. You're going to have to clean up the halos from the stacking. You've got to clean up the dust and the dirt. If an insect's been rummaging around in the dirt, you imagine the amount of dirt it's going to have on its face. And sometimes you sit there and think, I can't be bothered cleaning that up. I'll just bin that one. And the shot with the damselfly, where I got the Gerber daisy in the background refracting in the water droplets. I took 2,000, I think, images that night just to get that one shot because it kept moving. When you're setting up, I didn't like the setup. I didn't like the light. I tried from the side first of all, wasn't into it. So you get a lot of images. You've got a lot of processing that you've got to do. So be prepared to fork out for some decent fast hard drives and a decent computer to process it with, because it does take a lot of power.
And of course, in Photoshop, the file sizes, the minute you're stacking, like even if it's just 20, 30 images, the file size all of a sudden becomes humongous.
It does, yeah. It the big file sizes, so you got to be prepared to cope with that.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'm thinking is like, with a stack of like 100 images, even to 200 images, that insect better stay still.
Yeah. Again, that's why I go out in the middle of the night, because again, they're not moving; they're asleep. And if we take damselflies, for instance, even if you disturb them and wake them up, they can't fly away because they're too cold. They'll literally just they'll just sit there. And I'm thinking from the insect's point of view, it must be really scared. Because you get this big light all of a sudden comes on to you, and it's sitting there. It's like, oh my God, what's that? I'm too cold to fly away. I better just keep still so it don't see me. Yeah. And but I mean, they must be really bricking it, when these photographers are taking these shots of them, But again, they're too cold to move about. I mean, the most you'll get is, for instance, with the damselflies, you might get them move their front paw. They might wipe the dew off the eyes, which can ruin a shot sometimes, because then you got dew on one eye and not on the other eye. They do move, but it's very minimum. It's minimum.
I mean, one of the things I've heard in the past is that people tend to freeze, like butterflies, for example. Is that a thing? It sounds weird to me.
It is a thing. It is a thing, but in my opinion, it's wrong. It's morally wrong. Why? Well, let me come at you from this angle, okay? If you want to go and photograph an owl that's up in the tree, are you going to grab it from out of that tree, kill it, and then freeze it to take a picture? The same with deer. You're not going to kill a deer to take a picture. And I feel that should be the same way with insects. So anyone who's out there, if you've been told, bung it in the freezer, kill it, and pin it into us, and just don't do it, okay? Accept the challenge of going out there and getting the insect alive and in its environment. It's more rewarding than going out and killing an insect, I mean, I can go out now and I can grab something from the garden, put it in the freezer, kill it, take a picture, and I can get a high-level stack of it, and it'll be great. And it'll get all the likes in the world on Instagram, But why do that? Wouldn't it be better for me to sit there and go, I got this ladybird in the wild without harming it? Don't freeze them, okay?
And also, it's sort of, in my mind, it doesn't make any sense, because we're trying to showcase, the wonders of the living natural world. So it doesn't make any sense to then, shoot only.
I mean, I won't say I've never photographed dead insects. I've photographed my dead pets. So I did one with my praying mantis. I had him, praying mantis, they only live a year. I had him for a year. He wouldn't keep still for photos. So when he died, it was an opportunity to get a photo. But again, he died of old age. So I haven't killed him and put him in the freezer, But it's the only image I've got of him that was good, because praying mantises, they like to mimic a leaf in the wind, so they're constantly moving around like this, so you never get a shot of them, but when it comes to killing it, I won't say no to photographing dead insects because, again, you can find them naturally dead in the wild. I found a dragonfly once that was lying in the pool, and you could see all of the critters coming. It's like a race coming. Oh, lunchtime, I'm like, grab that, and I'll take a picture of it. I never published it though because I didn't feel the challenge was there because it was dead, you know. And if I'm going to get a dragonfly image like the image I got in my head of the dew-covered damn dragonfly in the morning light, I want it to be alive in the morning light. It's a challenge that I've accepted, and I won't. I didn't publish the image because it was like cheating in a way. You know,
I guess you can find that, like, you know, what do they call blue bottle flies or something around the house? They use them as practice objects. You know, that's probably. Okay.
If you want to practice, go out and buy a Lego set. That's just the way I feel. Yeah, I have a Lego Batman. I use them quite often for testing. I think they're up on my shelf. I use them for testing diffraction on lenses. I use them for testing high ISO. You know, how high can I go in the ISO on the camera before it becomes a concern? If you want to test or practice on an insect, go to your window ledge. You'll find dead flies on there quite often, where flies only live 2 days, you know. But don't purposely capture a living creature and kill it just for you to practice your photography. In my eyes, it's wrong. Now, I won't judge you for doing it. If you want to go do it. I'm not one of them people that will go castrate you because you've gone and done this. I'm not going to be doing that, but that's just my personal opinion. A lot of people that do high magnification photography, like with microscope lenses, they have to use dead insects, okay? Because it's the only way to get the shot. And again, you go do that if you wish to, but personally, I won't do that.
And if you are into Lego and you want to see how to shoot Lego in toy photography, hop over to the Platypod YouTube channel, where I've just finished a whole series on Lego specific videos.
I'll be going there in the winter because I might do some toy photography in the winter because I've got to do something for the YouTube.
Oh yeah,
I've got to hit that YouTube algorithm, so we have to do something in the winter, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
apart from going out and freezing my nuts off, which will be funny for a video. Apart from that, I'm thinking toy photography would be a good idea.
Yeah, toy photography is really fun. I mean, it's you know, I've had you know, a whole bunch of toy photographers on the show in the past. Dave the Bearmaker, Jesse Fireeisen. I've always found the subject.
Jesse's brilliant. He really is.
Jesse is phenomenal. Dave the Bearmaker's his the effort he puts into building dioramas is just, it's a whole different.
It's a whole of a skill level. Just building the dioramas itself, you know. I won't be taking it to that extreme. I'm leaning towards either Star Wars or Alien. I'm leaning towards Alien. I'll be honest with you. It's like spider images. It's more creepier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, when Larry said to me, "Can you put together a toy photography series, you know, based on Lego in particular?" I went, "Okay, well, Lego Star Wars it is." There you go. You know,
yeah, I've got Lego Batman personally.
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting because first of all, you know, everybody, it's very accessible. I think, you know, everybody's got, especially if you have kids.
You can go to a supermarket and get just the Lego figure for maybe £10. You go and put that onto your desk, and you can practice focus stacking. So you practice on the tripod first, focus stack. When you get a good focus stack of that Lego figure on a tripod, then take your camera off the tripod and do it again handheld, you know. Once you've got a handheld focus stack of that Lego figure, you go out and do it in the wild. You know, it's natural progression. But if you want to practice Lego figures, man, they're great for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, you know, in the Lego series that I've just finished on Platypod, you know, I went into everything from, we discussed focus stacking on there, but we also did things like special effects, for example, you know, a whole different range of, you know, different things. We're talking about dioramas, different background ideas, you know, using screens and actually building dioramas, and using things you find on a walk in the woods, you know, to build your scenes, you know, all the things you need in order to create some really cool images, and be creative, we sort of covered in this, is it eight episodes in this series, including stop motion.
Yeah. So, and again, you can do that in the winter as well, we can do it all year round.
Exactly.
So yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's a good way to practice macro photography, and there goes.
Yeah. Now, we got to talk about YouTube. That's the other thing I want to talk to you about. Obviously, most people would know you from your YouTube channel. How did you first get into YouTube as a medium for your photography?
My mate told me to. There's a couple of people that I have to thank for the YouTube. I mean, there's a few photographer YouTubers out there that were like, if you got an idea, just do it. I had an idea and I wanted to do macro photography. But my idea initially was to learn macro photography, get the top end gear, and then come to YouTube and teach it. And I watched a video, I'm not going to name names, but this guy was like, this is how you do macro photography. And he's got the top end gear, top end flash, it's flashing away. And I'm like, so do I need that gear to do macro photography? I'm not too sure. I didn't know. I didn't know at all. And my friend, a good friend of mine who supports the channel, he has actually bought me the EOS that's behind me. He turned round to me and he said it'd be way more interesting to watch me learn macro photography than to teach it. And he was like, just look, you've got a camera, just start doing it. And I'll tell you what, when you put yourself out there on YouTube and make a mistake, the community comes after you. They'll tell you you've made a mistake and how to correct it and tell you how to do it properly. I've learned more about macro photography by doing macro photography videos than actually reading books and actually watching macro photography. Because, again, if you make one simple mistake, they will point it out to you. And there's only like a very small percentage that are complete. I can't say it. But most of the community, they're like, hey, Stu, great video, great image. However, you did this part wrong. Maybe you should try it this way. And that's how I learned the RAW workflow in Helicon, because I was doing a TIFF workflow and someone popped up on my channel saying, I disagree with you on this one because you should be doing it this way. And I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. And it turned out it was a really good workflow. And yeah, YouTube is a great community. I'll say it's a great community with macro photographers because a lot of macro photographers support each other because it's a very small genre. But be prepared to take the hits from idiots because there's a lot on YouTube. It's probably the worst when it comes to negativity as well. So I don't know if you've experienced it with YouTube, but yeah.
I mean, very rarely. The thing is, I appreciate people who comment. I appreciate it if they like, what we do with the Camera Tech podcast. I appreciate any responses to the platypus videos that I make. I find it fascinating that people actually watch that stuff, to a degree. But if somebody disagrees, fine. That's okay.
Exactly.
I mean,
if you don't like it, move along.
Yeah. I mean, I've never really been interested necessarily in numbers or, because
I said exactly the same thing on the last video I put up. Someone asked me about how to grow a following. And I said, I'm really not interested in numbers. I don't chase likes. I don't chase subscribers. In fact, I've actually stopped asking people to subscribe now. I don't bother with that no more. I'll put out the content because I enjoy doing the content, And if someone pops along who's new and likes it, they subscribe. I'm not a numbers chaser. I'm really not. So when it comes to YouTube has given me a platform for me to get my work out there. So it's given me an audience. So I'm very grateful for that. But again, it's a mixed bag when it comes to YouTube. It really is. You can work weeks on one video and 500 people watch it. I then slap a video together within an hour and 10,000 people watch it. It's weird. It's a weird platform. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I've not found any rhyme or reason. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I make an episode for the podcast and I'm thinking like, oh, I love this episode. there's so much really incredible information in there, and it's literally like, nobody watches it, and then that's another video where you just go, okay, well, that was fun, but nothing special, and then all of a sudden it takes off. And of course, when I say taking off,
sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, when I say taking off for this channel, this is a really tiny channel. It's an interesting thing in the world of podcasting in general, because of course podcasts are by their very nature an audio-centric format. It's an audio-centric medium. So the fact that there is a YouTube version at all is simply down to the fact that we're talking about photography, which is a visual thing. So, when I first started this podcast with a friend of mine, Nick, in the very beginning, we kind of thought, well, we have to do a YouTube version because A, we have cameras, so why not use them? And secondly, we're talking about photography, so there's got to be a way that we can showcase the photography that we're talking about. And clearly, YouTube made sense at the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a couple of months ago, me and the wife, we worked on a video for depth of field. In my opinion, it's the video to watch if you want to understand depth of field in macro photography. We have everything. We talk about everything that affects depth of field, basically. It probably took me a week to write the script, 2 weeks to film it. We had the teleprompter out in the wild, actually doing this. We had weird looks from people. And it got a couple of thousand people watch it. And I'm like, okay. And then I think it was the week afterwards, I was like, I need a video to put out. I've only got a couple of days to get a video out. I said, I'm just going to go and photograph ants up here at Cannock Chase up around Mere Pool. So we went up there. We spent half an hour filming it. I spent probably a couple of hours editing it. And that thing took off. And I'm just like, the one we spent all the time on didn't take off. And the one that we just winged it and go, just slap the camera down there, we'll just film from there, took off. It is a weird platform. It really is.
Yeah, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. And anybody who tells you that they know exactly what you have to do in order to make a video go viral are most likely lying to you. Yeah, because I haven't found any logic in it.
You need some sort of controversy. You need something that's happened, like someone's punched you. I mean, the best thing I could have in my channel is if I'm out and about doing a YouTube video, someone come up and just punch me for no reason, because that would take off. I'm sure there's plenty of volunteers out there that will do that for me. You got to have misleading thumbnails, a misleading title, someone stole my camera gear. That'll get watched, and then in the end of the video, it's just my daughter that's took off with the camera gear just to take a shot of something. Yeah. I'm an honest person, so I suffer from being too honest. So if I've got a video where my daughter takes off my camera, I'll say my daughter tries macro photography rather than my camera gear got stolen, Yeah. That's just the way I am. I don't like clickbait at all.
So the title of this episode will be Stewart Says Punch Me. Tell you what.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if I hit 100,000 likes, I'll come down to London and you can punch me in the face. How's that like? 100,000 subscribers on my channel, I'll come down and you can punch me in the face. Worked for Peter McKinnon. He punched himself in the face, so... Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
You'll get an email next year going, I've got 100,000 subscribers. I'll need to come down to London so you can punch me in the face.
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Oh, God.
But, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing. So how did you, when you first got into making YouTube videos, did you already have all the know-how when it comes to filming and the filmmaking part of it? Or
absolutely nothing at all. I went from a red cam, and the first camera I had that I started my YouTube video with, and anyone who's watching can go on my YouTube channel and go to my videos, put it in oldest first, and you'll see the video. Right? I started on a Canon 650D. God, that thing was awful autofocus. Halfway through the video, I'm constantly going focus, because it's just going out of focus. And that's where we go back to talking about upgrading the gear. That's when there was a necessity to upgrade the gear because I needed a good video camera. And then I went to the 80D that had dual pixel autofocus. That thing was really good at nailing focus. But, I'd bang out videos and then someone would comment, your audio sucks. Okay, let's look into the audio. Oh, my microphone is not very good, so I'll upgrade the microphone. And it just goes on from there. You learn from your mistakes. So when we started going outdoors, I was finding that we wasn't nailing the exposure perfectly. And the A2D does 8-bit footage. So if you don't expose perfectly with that camera and you try to adjust it in post, the footage falls apart. So I was putting out videos where there's footage was overexposed and stuff like that. And I was like, it's starting to annoy me, time for an upgrade. So that's when I went full frame with the EOS R, and having to teach the wife exactly how to expose. So it was +1 overexposure when you're doing Canon log on the EOS R. And if you don't hit that +1, or if you're on +1 when you press record and a cloud comes in front of the sun, you've got no chance, So then I upgraded from there to the Sony, which is what you're watching now. It's the ZV-E1. That's a 10-bit footage. So with the 10-bit footage, you're getting a bit of leeway with being able to adjust your exposure afterwards. So, yeah, it's a learn as you go when it comes to YouTube. It really is. And anyone who's wanting to start a YouTube channel out there, absolutely do it. Work on your audio first, because if you've got bad audio, people won't watch it. If you've got bad visuals, but your audio is nice and clear, they'll still watch it. So audio comes first and then video afterwards.
And they're really amazing audio tools that you can use nowadays that actually didn't exist when I first started, this journey, that are AI driven, that really do all the heavy lifting for you. So you don't even have to be, a trained audio engineer to get any decent audio out of your gear.
Try and get it as good as possible, because the better the audio is, the better the audio correction will be on that audio. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But I mean, when I first started, every little noise outside would be picked up. The room was echoey. Keep banging my desk, I'd get up, all that. Well, I said now, I don't know what software you use for editing. I'm using DaVinci Resolve, and there's a little button you can press on to basically just fix the audio. And it'll drown out any background noise and just emphasize your voice. And it's to the point now where if you watch any of my recent outdoor videos, probably talking the last year, maybe 2 years, you can hear birds in the background of my videos, okay? They are put in on purpose, because when you put the AI onto your audio, it literally cuts out everything, and it sounds fake because there is no ambient. So I record ambient sound, then put it on top of it so that it sounds more natural,
Yeah, I did that. I did an episode at the photography show. So every year I do an episode at the photography show, and it was, I think, 2 years ago, I did an episode where I full on I isolated the vocal tracks or the voice tracks, and it, just to drown out all the background noise, because it's, by its nature, it's a very noisy environment. There's thousands of people, there's all sorts of different stuff going on. And when I put the video together, I thought, I didn't really necessarily notice it when I was editing it. It was only once it was up and running, and I listened back to it at some point, and I'm like, actually, it really sounds totally fake, because, yes, you can hear the voices very clearly, the interviews are very clear and everything, but it just feels fake because we're in this environment. You can see lots of people and you can't really hear very much of the background noise. So that's what I did at the last show, was I recorded like a Foley track, which is basically just background noise. And that really runs underneath a lot of that.
Yeah. And I've got full respect for anyone who does a video with the photography show, I tell you. I've tried it once, never again.
Oh, well,
mostly.
I'm always...
Sorry, I lose concentration because I'm too busy eyeing up the camera gear than actually doing the video. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But when it comes to my outdoor videos, I use the Zoom F2 recorder, very budget-friendly recorder, and it's a Float 32 recorder. So anyone doesn't understand, the easiest way I can put it is Float 32 is like recording RAW on the audio side. So if I look down or get too excited because I've got a picture I ain't got before and I'll start shouting, I can bring down the levels. And I use the lav mic that comes with it. But that lav mic, if it's that far away, it's not going to pick up any. There you go. If it's that far away, it's not going to pick up really much noise at all. So that's great for isolating your voice, but it just sounds fake when you're out in the world. So you have to have that track over the top of. I mean, literally all I do is I just press record on my camera with just a normal microphone, let it record for a minute, and then loop it in the editing, just so you got those birds chirping in the background. So it's like you listen to it and you're like, yeah, he's outdoors, you know. But if you heard this single track, it's just like this. There's no ambient sound at all. It just looks fake, you know.
Yeah.
So and again, I learned that as I go along, because I recorded an outdoor video. It sounded fake, and I'm like, we've got to go back out and record audio. And the wife's like, we've got to go back out. I'm like, yeah. And we've got to go back out to the same spot as well, because you got water flowing and you got train tracks there. So you've got to go to the same spot we recorded it to get 5 minutes of audio. And by going back and forward, it teaches you to get it when you're there at the time. Same with the B-roll. When I first started the outdoor videos, it'd take 3 trips, because I'd have to have the talking head section, go back and get audio, then go back and get B-roll, and do all the backwards and forwards, and wasting time travelling to the location. You learn to start doing it when you're there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now I'll typically do the talking head section. I'll then turn that off, slap the macro lens onto the ZVE one, get some macro B-roll or whatever is I've photographed throughout the afternoon, and then the very last thing we'll do is the ambient sound of the location we're at. And one thing I can say is the ambient sound in my videos is the ambient sound of that location. It's just not recorded at the same time as me talking, you know.
Yeah.
And when you put it all together, it's quite satisfying when it all comes together and you got like a nice video.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, I'm pretty sure everybody who starts with things like YouTube will make those mistakes in the beginning. It's perfect normal. I remember doing a video for Platypod last year at some point, where it was all about me paring down my portrait photography gear, including a strobe and modifiers and everything, so that I can fit it into a backpack so I can take it on my Vespa. Basically, that was the idea. The idea was, I can pare down this gear so I can basically do on-location selfies with my portrait photography gear anywhere very easily, right? That was the idea. So basically, I found a location about 20 minutes or something from here, out in the sticks, and it's a great location. I drove up there with a Vespa, set up. Of course, it was a much bigger thing because I had a teleprompter, just like you mentioned earlier. Yeah. So my wife was basically part of the support crew, and my stepdaughter, they were basically literally out there in the support vehicle. We shot this whole scene. We shot all the talking heads there and the B-roll and everything. And then we get home, I upload the stuff on the computer, there's no audio track. Oh my God.
Been there and done that.
And so, and then I had to break it to my wife. I'm like, darling, we're going to have to go back out again tomorrow and reshoot all of that. I could use the B-roll that I'd shot, because it was about, it was showcasing Platypod gear in this context. So the B-roll was fine, and we shot a time lapse of the actual shoot and everything. All that was fine, but all the talking headshots, what did we do? So we had to get all the gear back out there on the Vespa. Of course, I'm sitting on the Vespa as I'm doing the talking to the camera bit. It was a pain in the neck, but you live and you learn. And 100%. Every time I go out and I do an on-location thing, I will check and double-check and triple-check the audio just to make sure it's right.
The wife does it with me now. She's like, have you press record? You press record? She had a nightmare time the last few years because we was using the EOS R for the outdoor videos. And the EOS R, okay, so it's the first one, it's the first mirrorless camera that Canon did. Okay, it has eye autofocus on it, okay? but it has a fascination with blades of grass. So, I'm in the middle of the frame like this. The eye autofocus is on me. You'll press record, and I'm talking away, blah, 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 and all of a sudden it will go bang down to the corner on a blade of grass and then back up again. And the missus is like, it's lost focus. And I got to the point where I was like, forget it. I'm just going to keep talking and we'll stick B-roll over the top. So if you watch some videos that are prior to January of this year, you'll see I'm talking to the camera and all of a sudden it'll cut to B-roll of just some random thing. That's because the camera lost focus. I was just like B-roll over the top of it. And, the missus, she films most of the outdoor stuff. And I said to her, we've got an opportunity to upgrade now. What is it that you hate about the camera? And what she hated was there was no stabilisation, so it was constantly on a tripod. The focusing was constantly off, and she hated constantly having to get +1 on the exposure for the Canon light. So we upgraded the camera this year because there was a necessity, because I was getting irritated with the focusing. It really was. And we went with the Sony ZV-E1. And now the missus is running around handheld, nailing every single shot. I don't even have to ask her, is it in focus? Because that camera just nails it every single time. I can have my hat on or off, it will nail it. Glasses on, it will nail it. Low light, it will nail it every single time. And the stabilisation means that I can now move around while I'm doing the YouTube videos, whereas before I was locked off on a tripod. So you'd have to find something to photograph, lock it off on the tripod, photograph it. It's very scripted, whereas now it's more off the cuff because the missus can just follow me around with that camera. I mean, it's absolutely fabulous, that camera is. And it's especially good at doing macro B-roll when you put the Sony 90mm lens on it with its active dynamic stabilisation and all that stuff. No, not active stabilisation, the optical stabilisation. I'm trying to remember. Optical stabilisation with the image sensor stabilisation. I can handhold and record ants at 1x macro. It really is good. And again, it's that thing learning from macro, not macro, from YouTube. As you do each video and you make mistakes, those mistakes, if they carry on, such as with the camera focusing on grass, you sit there and you go, right, it's time for an upgrade. You need something with better autofocus, or you want something that's got better dynamic range. So if the clouds, so the sun's going in and out the clouds, you're able to correct for that exposure without having to stop and go, turn the ND filter, now start again. And I'm sure you've done that. You've been there and done that, haven't you?
Yeah.
You're constantly turning your ND filter to correct your exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, what I do now is a lot of the time when I use a gimbal in particular, I said there's like a little index finger wheel on the gimbal that you can program. It's like a little sort of toggle wheel. And I program that to ISO. So I can change the ISO really with the flick of a finger. And so I can change the exposure. I can react to exposure changes on the fly. And it works perfectly. It's a little bit like using an ND filter, only, of course, that only works as long as the situation isn't too extreme. But I can literally just respond to, to little exposure changes or light changes very, very quickly.
We don't use gimbals no more. I've actually sold my gimbal.
Yeah, it's
the little Sony is so good at doing its stabilisation that we don't need. I mean, the missus can just hold the camera like that, and you can see her moving around, but then the footage is just it's brilliant, and it's one less piece of gear we've got to take out with me.
Yeah,
it's absolutely. One less piece of gear that the wife has to learn how to use, because again, I'm in front of the camera, so I can't be behind it, And she said to me that she wants it so she can just literally point and shoot, and the cameras are getting that good now, you can literally just point and shoot them.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. But even like something like eye autofocus, I sort of come from a world originally where video autofocus wasn't really a thing. It was all predominantly manual, And for the longest time, I shot, even at the beginning of this channel, I shot everything on a Nikon D750, which for stills photography is a really great little camera, but video, well, it actually really sucked. not that the image didn't look good.
Yeah.
The image looked okay, but there was no video.
When it got it right, it looked good. That's similar
when
to my Canon when I first started. When you got it right, it looked fabulous. It really did look good. Yeah. But it's in them situations where it's not quite exposed properly, and that's when you start noticing issues. And I guarantee you right now, none of my viewers noticed the issue. It's only me that noticed it while I'm editing, you know? And it's just, it's having that certain level of perfection or quality that you want out yourself. And I'm constantly pushing myself. And every time I do a YouTube video, it doesn't matter if it's a YouTube video about X, Y, Z, I always film it in such a way that it's for Platypod or it's for Laowa, you know? And so I wanted at that high quality, which is why I went with the Sony ZV-E1. Really great camera for doing YouTube. And it's a budget-friendly camera as well. And it cost me £1,500.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Full frame, 4K, 120 frames a second, 10-bit internal recording, £1,500. You can't moan at that.
Yeah.
And so far, it's not overheated as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I mean, we're using it right now. I mean, how long have we been going now? Hour and 40 minutes we've been going now.
Yeah.
It still hasn't overheated. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the Sonys are amazing. And that, Nikon is really, coming up to the plate. And the Z6 III is phenomenal for that.
Yeah. I mean, I could easily say that there isn't a bad camera out there for doing YouTube. Canon can do it. Sony can do it. Nikon can do it. I would think it would come down to budget at the end of the day, which is why we went to Sony, because to get the same out of Canon that we have with the ZV-E1, I'd have to spend about £4,000 with the Canon gear, which would be the R5 or the R6. I didn't have that budget, so it was like, I was nervous switching to Sony, but as soon as I turned that thing on, I was like, wow. It was. Yeah.
And of course, it's a reality for anybody thinking about starting a YouTube channel. You can actually just start on your iPhone,
I've done videos on the iPhone.
Yeah.
It works great, because at the end of the day, if your audio is good and your subject matter is interesting, it doesn't matter what you film it on. Okay, when we're talking about cameras, we're talking about the end of our YouTube journey type of thing, getting the camera that we wanted.
Yeah.
But if you've got an iPhone or an Android phone, any mobile phone, just use that. What's important is your microphone. You want a decent audio, because if your audio sucks, no one's going to watch it, okay? And again, I think my audio setup that I use, if you go on any of my videos, there'll be a link for it. It's the Zoom F2. The microphone comes with it, and I think it was £130. And again, that's Float 32 as well. So you haven't got to worry about setting your audio levels, because you can recover it quite easily.
Yeah.
You plop that on, you record with your phone, and then in post, you synchronise the audio up. You can synchronise it by waveform, and then you delete the audio from your iPhone, and you'll find yourself, you've got decent audio, half decent video. I mean, I won't knock the iPhone, but I don't like the depth of field on the mobile devices, which is why I went for the full frame. But then, if you stick a music track underneath it, it'll cover up those little knocks and those little sounds, because you've got this little audio music track underneath it, just go for it. The best advice I had when it comes to YouTube was just start, because if you go watch half a dozen videos how to do YouTube, what camera do I want, what microphone do I want, you're never going to get started, because you're constantly going on like, oh, I need the Sony because I need what Stewart Wood uses, or I need a Nikon, I need what you use. Kay, what do you use? What do you use? There you go. Yeah, you don't need to start it. That's what you're going to have once you've got going. Okay, that's like, I wouldn't say it's the end of the journey, because obviously there's always a better camera to add. It's a constant chase. There's always a better camera. But to start with, just start with whatever you can have already in your pocket and get a microphone. Hell, if you haven't got a video camera, if you haven't got a mobile Yeah, I mean, I don't know who hasn't got a mobile, but if you haven't, let's say, for instance, you're 17, you can't get a mobile, your mum and daddy hasn't bought you one because they're broke. Then get yourself a little headset for your computer and just put your images on as a carousel or as a gallery. And then you can do a voiceover on it explaining what it was you photographed, what you were thinking when you photographed it, and just start, just start. Yeah. It's the best advice you can give is just to start. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Done is better than perfect, as I say.
Yes.
Yes, that's the thing. Incidentally,
the amount of videos I'll put in the bin because it wasn't perfect. I'll sit there thinking, actually, I should have put them out because, there's a teachable moment there.
Yeah, and you just have to get it done. I mean, that's the thing. It's one of those stories I've told a million times on this podcast. Everybody knows it.
Yes.
It's the very first episode of this podcast was called "Done is Better Than Perfect" because neither Nick nor I knew anything about podcasting. We're zero idea. We just thought at the beginning of the pandemic, we just thought it sounds like a good idea, because it keeps us busy, keeps us creative. Let's just do something. But we had no idea about anything to do with podcasting. No idea. Like, where do podcasts live? Zero idea. How do you do it? How long should it be? What should it be called? What are we talking about? No idea. And so, I mean, it's like you say,
if you want inspiration, right, go back and watch some of my early videos, right? I can guarantee you now, any child, 10-year-old with an iPhone can do better than what I was doing back then. I can guarantee it now.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at it and I cringe. I really do. Yeah.
So what's your future planning for your YouTube channel?
I kind of wing it. I mean, I could tell you what I plan to do, but I guarantee it won't happen because something will change. But I do want to start doing more nature photography on the channel. Gives a bit of variety, and it's a natural progression from macro to nature. Obviously, I want to upgrade my camera, but I don't really want to. It's weird, isn't it? You want to upgrade, but you don't. I want to upgrade so that I can advise people whether they should upgrade, if that makes sense. Yeah? I don't want to upgrade because I have to upgrade because this isn't doing something. I did do a video 2 weeks ago about the M1 versus the OM1 and the OM1 Mark II and my initial thoughts on those cameras and which ones you should buy if you are doing macro photography. I don't think OM Systems will like that video. Basically, because I basically say I'm not upgrading because I got no need to upgrade. It does the job. But what I would like to do is to do more natural light macro photography. That's one thing I want to get into. So it's a massive challenge because you've got to know the subject. You've got to know where to find it. You have to go out when the light is good because you can't go out in the middle of the day. So it's awful. And you're using low shutter speed to get the shots. So there's a lot of factors at play for that. And kudos to the people that do natural light macro because it is very hard. That's what I do want to do. So they got the nature, natural light macro. And I want to do more fun videos as well, like just having fun. I'd also like to get more macro photographers on the channel. So I like being behind the video camera, So I have thought about contacting some macro photographers and saying, would you like me to follow you along for like a day in the life of your macro photography and put it on the channel? That's something I would like to start doing. But again, it's early stages. So whether it actually happens, don't hold me to it, okay?
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Thank you so much for being the guest on today's episode of the Camera Shake podcast, Stuart. It was an absolute
Thank you for
pleasure.
having me.
And as always, I've learned a lot about macro photography that I didn't know. And so the hope is that if you've been listening or watching up to this point, first of all, well done. And secondly, the hope is that you've learned a thing or two as well. So Stuart, thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was awesome having Stuart on the show. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 208 with Pics and Perfects on Tinder. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there are fully fledged video versions over on YouTube with plenty of examples for our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, you should know by now because I mention it all the time. There you go. All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, just drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Thank you for listening and watching. And remember, new episode drops every Thursday, so mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.